Okay, we're live. Okay, so we are going to talk first. I want to talk about on page 18 in our book. It says when curriculum fails to incorporate the perspectives of people of color, it adds to their marginalization in the academic sphere. But when you go to the first page of chapter 1, they say that curriculum is created to include values in politics, such as which knowledge counts most and should function in society. Yet, we're still not including Black history into our curriculum. So, if you go over to page, let's see here, it talks about how kids still aren't okay right here. So on page 23, it says how people of color are portrayed through text/knowledge may also do the work of racism. If curriculum serves as a reflection of society, what kind of image stares back to the students? So that goes back into the historically relevant things like the layers, and it talks about like their identity, how they see themselves, how others see them, and how they want to be seen. So my main question is kind of like, how can we change this when we're not the ones writing the text? As educators, we're going to be given a history book and expected to teach it, even though it may not be culturally relevant to the time we are teaching it. So what are some things as educators we can do better to support these students so that they're not just seeing themselves as slaves or people that sat on the back of the bus? How can we show them that their voices from years and years ago have been so important and so loud, even when people have chosen to not hear them?
Well, and I think it's also important to address like that we as educators tell our kids all the time to speak up and to never stay silent, but you see these school corporations. Ma'am, that is so rude. I'm trying to have a discussion. Sorry, my cat's playing with a plastic bag. How we as educators try to, I guess the word I'm looking for is we try to like persuade and to influence and inspire our kids to never stay quiet. If you see something wrong that's being done, you should say something.
Say something.
But like at what cost? Because we have a whitewashed education system that's being laid out right in front of us. How can we as educators tell our kids to speak up about something that isn't systemically right, but our teachings don't reflect that. We're not having culturally relevant teaching practices and integrating different cultures in our teaching practices. And we're teaching Black kids about their culture through slavery, just like Haley said about slavery and sitting at the back of the bus, and how their only spot in here is through oppression and through always having to bring your own chair to the table of education. There's not a spot for you. You have to make one for yourself. But why? I think Kaylee did a perfect job in explaining how like we as educators can do more, not leaving it up to the students to be able to self-identify with their culture just outside the classroom, when we can use the classroom as foundation grounds for these kids to discover their culture and see Black excellence just portrayed in literacy and all of these great, influential speakers and novelists and poets, and those all get put on the back burner. And I think that has to go with what I was talking about in my reading with colorblindness and post-racism, and how it still plays a pretty prevalent role in today's society. On page 10, I highlighted where it says racism produces in Blacks the experience of double consciousness from the pressures of having to live in two worlds, one Black and one white. And I think that goes perfectly with what me and Haley were talking about, with how they're having to learn two different systems because their system, who they are individually, and who they identify culturally and everything else, there's not a spot for that. There's not a spot for that in education, but there is for white kids. So it goes to continue on about, it talks about Jim Crow, and that's kind of into Paige's part. They kind of like intermingled, like mine and hers, and then it goes into talking about the ideology of colorblindness and how it represents fundamental change to race-minded educators, making institutional race seem, or institutional race analysis, as the book calls it, seems all but out of sync. And I like how I use that word, out of sync, because it's in sync is something that is integrated, something that is cohesive. It's out of sync. This institutional racial analysis and these race-minded educators are not in sync with public school culture, despite the fact we have no shortage of data pointing to the reality of institutionalized racism. We have all these things, and we have all these sources and strategies and skills that we can implement culture in classes, but it's just not happening. Another point it pointed out was that it says, as a belief system, both colorblindness and post-racialism articulate with institutions and become powerful forces in education and society at large. Although racism is a social problem, the solution offered is centered on individual choices. Although the problem is racial in nature, the solution is not non-racial. So we as teachers, like how Haley talked about, taking those biases and taking those pre-thoughts that we have out the window, or not really out the window, put them on the plate, put them out in front of you, address them, because you'll never be an effective educator if you don't. Those will constantly sit at the surface of your brain, and those will be put into your teachings, and you'll be subconsciously teaching this whitewashed system because that's at the surface, that's what's here. But as educators, we need to really dive into what these authors are trying to say and these problems that they're surfacing, that we're not integrating culture and those types of things into our teachings, and our kids are paying the price for it. It talks about, my last point is that the book kind of introduces the central theme for thinking about teaching race in education and how it's designed as a primer. I like how the author used that. It's a primer. So it's just the foundation. It's just the starting point for efficiently moving readers in terms of literacy from the one theme to the next. And it talks about how community integration and things like that and community involvement really help highlight some of these points into the education system, because the community does play a really large role in the education system. So I'm just kind of, I read all of this and it just brings some questions like, how can we as educators use what we have to kind of break that colorblindness and post-racism in the curriculums, and how can we use our curriculums to kind of branch out from that whitewash system we still find ourselves ending back up in over and over again, in history kind of repeating itself over and over again.
Like, I think one of the huge things too is that we have to think about is, like, it touches about like the KKK, but it's such a little thing, I feel like, in history books, because it's like they don't want white kids to see these horrible white men do these things. So it's like such a swept
The reality of it, like, we can't fabricate history because of how a white kid in the class might feel, because we fabricate history for the viewpoint of all Black kids.
Like, we leave out all the nasty of the white society because we don't want to offend our white children in their fragile state.
Sweet
But
God.
yet in history, all the things that have ever happened to any other culture or race is like highlighted. 9/11, it's plastered that they were Muslim terrorists, and and to sit there to be a Muslim child, I literally can't imagine to
Could
hear
not.
about my culture, who I am being destroyed and taken through the mud.
And being represented this way by an educator
Right.
to everyone that knows nothing about your culture. Like this is
Right.
their first experience of learning in reference to 9/11. That was my first exposure to Muslim culture, was learning about 9/11. And it's that sticks with kids. And they become crazy to think. Kids become adults one day, and what they learn in our classroom sticks with them forever.
Yeah. And
So
I mean,
that's crazy to me.
I just think for like what they're trying, like that's how they see themselves in the text. They see themselves as a terrorist, but yet God forbid the white kids see themselves as part of the KKK. Like, and just because we don't wear the head coverings doesn't mean we're not doing the same exact things.
Exactly.
Now.
2020 has done a great way of showing white supremacy without the capes and the dressing.
And it's just like,
Mhm.
when is it enough? When do we bring in culturally relevant information that is uncomfortable to talk about as a white educator talking to a group of biracial children? It's going to make us uncomfortable because it's things that we should know. It's things that we should have answers to, but yet we're going to have to research and ask questions and dig deep because we're not aware, So it's like, I don't know why they try to brush away these things. And I know Paige has a little something about that, about the culturally relevant things and what's happening right now being swept away because they're uncomfortable. And our other reading from Dr. Taylor's class, we learned about how when we teach, we need to be honest, we need to be raw, we need to be bold, and we need to be unapologetic to get these things across and to get them across correctly and fix history. We're continuing to allow it to repeat itself when we've been given the answers to fix it years ago, but we continue to sweep it under the rug.
Exactly. When do we say like it's time to challenge this way of doing things?
Time to challenge a whitewashed education system.
This curriculum. When do we say like, I don't want to freaking learn about Johnny Appleseed anymore? Like, he's a great guy, but like, is he relevant?
Right.
Is he relevant? No. Like, and why would that little boy right there who's Black want to even know about him? What has he done for him? What has Johnny Appleseed done for him? Or
what this class really makes me want to do? Sit in a first grade classroom and see how educators teach about Columbus Day. Because I did not know about all of the scandal and the reality behind Columbus Day, embarrassingly enough, and I will admittedly say it, until college. I didn't know.
I didn't either until last year, and I was like, are you serious?
When I was growing up in school, however many years ago, we had a whole day of celebrating Columbus Day, and it was fabricated.
Yeah, you got to pick if you wanted to be a
white Americans feel good about being an American because they wanted to tell us, yeah, no, you guys discovered America. We did, and that's why we all are going to celebrate it. Well, no, that's not right, and that's not how America was discovered. And like, it's all based on, exactly. Well, I don't want my white students to feel like they're murderers or that they are racist or that they, had mass genocides in their history. Like, I don't want them to think that's what they are. But then why do we do it to everybody else?
Yep.
All right. So Paige, share some tea with us.
Okay. So I'm like really close friends with a girl that goes to Fishers High School, and she is like very close with a couple of the teachers there, but all of the staff last night got an email saying that they were no longer allowed to teach anything about Black Lives Matter during Black History Month. Like the principal's just like, actually, we're done talking about it. Don't talk about it during your class. and she actually got sent a copy of the email. And the first paragraph reads, I have heard from a number of parents who are concerned about who we are advancing the cause of Black Lives Matter, a political movement within the country. They contend that their children are being indoctrinated rather than taught that this is an effort of, it's so small, that this effort has been distracted from their academic purpose. Where's the line between teaching about a political movement and promoting that political movement? Before we go forward, let us suspend the argument that Black Lives Matter is a social issue or concept that rather a political movement. If we can accept for the sake of discussion that it is a political issue, then my question takes on a great deal of significance, because as school officials, we cannot expose our political views, and we cannot advance a political cause through our work with students. And like the rest of the email just goes on to talk about how we promoted this at first, because at the beginning of the year, they also got an email saying that they needed to be educating their students on this fact. And now they're saying, well, we have parents who aren't happy about it. And also their school, like the principal of the school and the dean of students are very conservative, and everyone in the school knows that. So the email they got the first time, like there were teachers that literally leaked, like, no, I put that email together. There was a teacher who was like, no, the first email promoting Black Lives Matter, teaching that to students, I put the email together. The principal didn't even send that out. Gave me his email, and I had to literally do all the work to get it put out there. And now he's saying during Black History Month, actually, we're done talking about it. Don't say another word about it.
So again, the culturally relevant information is swept under the rug because it's uncomfortable and parents have had enough.
Wouldn't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
We don't want to, our kids aren't getting a good education.
Well, and it's like,
So
this
you're
is
worried
the
about your
perfect
white
opportunity for kids to be learning about this stuff, is when they're young and when they have a concept of feelings and people's feelings, and how all of these, everything that's played out in 2020, we can just use recent history. Like 2020 went down in history, like the world shut down because it was addressed that Black people were not being treated right, and civil rights were not a priority in America. And a dollar sign or whatever is happening in America should not be set as a priority over someone's basic rights. And that's what we need to be teaching. But these teachers trying to silence these types of uncomfortable conversations. I've said it once, I'll say it 100 times. I'm white. There's nothing I can change about that. I don't understand exactly what you're going through, but I will stand with you and I will bring awareness. I promise, as an educator, I will bring awareness to these problems, and I will integrate culturally relevant teachings into my classroom. We will not have a whitewashed classroom teaching. It won't, because how do we expect change if we consistently just I'm just baffled at Black History Month. You want to suspend the conversation of the importance of Black Lives Matter in the year of 2021 after we just went through all of that.
There's too touchy of a topic for people.
All the students are tweeting at the school and saying stuff like this one
I'm
says,
surprised the news hasn't gotten wind of this.
I'm sure it will. Well, because the girl I'm talking to is very puts her political opinion out there, and she's already said that there's news companies that have already sent out emails asking. She's one of the students they asked.
My sister's a news reporter. I can arrange that.
Yeah. And some kids said, "Are you serious? What kind of email was that? Unprofessional, immature, childish. You better apologize. What you said was so disrespectful and disgusting. You guys know better. If you're a professional, then act like it." That was coming from the students, saying
kid.
Yeah.
That's coming from a kid.
Right.
I mean, it goes back to the critical need for cultural relevant and culturally responsive pedagogy is best exemplified when we literally connect the past to the present and how we continue to do nothing in between to change those things. We continue to shut it down with an email. And the reality is it's easy to blame it on the parents, because to say hey, you work with a racist son of a is a little bit it's just easier to say the parents are uncomfortable. And that's there's also teachers that are uncomfortable with it. Like, and that's just the reality. And
And
that
in
goes
reality,
back to the whole like unpacking yourself in your own personal biases. If you are that biased towards a certain culture or race or gender, or if you're
don't teach.
gay or whatever, get the hell out of the classroom, because you're doing more harm than you will ever do good to these students, to these
Mhm.
children. I mean, they're literally children. Even
And you're
in high
keeping
school,
them
like,
closed-minded in a society that's already closed-minded. Like we're
Exactly.
trying, as teachers, our goal is to let kids explore education. And that's not just white education, all education. We are teachers. We are all things to all people. So how can we, as teachers, be all things to all people if that's not what our teachings reflect? And that's not what our materials that we bring to the classroom reflect, and our focal points of conversation reflect.
and like
Yeah,
on
100%.
page 22, it says they pose the question what are the rules and who makes them? And then it goes down a little bit further and it says these same people, white men, are the ones that get to deem questions worthy and curriculum worthy to be in textbooks. And it's like, why are they the
What
ones?
gives you that?
Why are white
Mhm.
men writing Black history?
That is the key question. That is
Why
the
are
key
white
question. Why are white men?
writing Black history and expecting children of different races to want to learn from that when it's
Exactly.
not correct?
And it's not coming from a like point of understanding. Like whoever wrote that has no idea what feelings or how that affected that community. You aren't Black. So how can you write about something and how it affected a whole community from a third person point of view? How can we accurately teach these kids exactly what was going on during this time period, or these great scholars that offer great insight to what these time periods were like, and placing Black excellence in classrooms versus just them as like painting the picture of Black history as like poems or stories or fairy tales, when that's exactly how the system works. Is they do multicultural teachings versus culturally relevant teachings. They bring it to the surface. Okay, this is it, we're going to talk about it for a week, okay, move on. No, it should just be naturally integrated in your teachings.
Mhm.
Because when we're trying to get kids to develop, we don't want them to develop skills from view. When how do we expect them not to when that's all they're being taught?
So I guess one of the questions that I pose is, we continue to take the, like Paige just said, the Black Lives Matter movement now is being taken out of Fisher School. And it's like, what type of message does that send though to children that are Black or maybe have had parents that have been negatively affected in ways like being pulled over by cops for no reason, and their house is being raided for no reason, or even them now at a high school level. I know that you look at high school boys, they talk about how they begin to get looked at differently. They're no longer this cute little fluffy haired boy, but are they shoplifting? Are they stealing? Are they here to rob my store or to cause trouble? Are they buying drugs on the corner? Like, it's what type of message does that send to these children when you send out this mass email saying your movement was important for a few months, but no longer
But now we're done talking
no
about it.
longer
It's not
talked
important.
about? What is like how are these kids supposed to feel, and their parents to get an email that says we stood by you, but now we're branching on to almost a year and we gotta let it go?
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
done with that.
Like what?
Exactly. It makes no sense.
Like, what do you mean? And we continue, and it even goes down to like a lower level of younger children and like what they see at school. It's young as like K through 2, when they go to the bookshelf and all the books are these white princesses and these white little boys playing outside. And it's not that, I think sometimes we like pedagogies, we have to think of like that. How do we bring that type of stuff into the classroom? Because like I love the books like Hair Love and Don't Touch My Hair and stuff like that. But why is that the only type of stuff that we have in our classrooms? Why aren't we searching for books that just have a little black boy in there just doing little kid things?
Just
And
doing little kid things, exactly. Not
they
having to
grab
constantly
that book
defend
and be like,
himself to a
"Oh,
culture that tells him that he doesn't look right or he doesn't
right."
fit.
Like, why
Why
is
do
it?
we
Why
have to
are they
have
only
informative class books about don't touch my hair? Like, why
and
is
even,
that?
like,
That's not-
diverse authors? I don't. Again, if you are white, why are you writing a book about Black
else's
kids'
story.
experiences?
Mhm.
Why are you talking about their hair? Let them publish the story. Let them be the person who speaks about themselves. So I feel like as educators, we really have to be mindful when we're picking just books for our classroom, when we're picking films to watch, like Magic School Bus, like there's like a little black boy in there, and that's great. But it's like there's also like Magic Treehouse that everyone's white. So it's like just I feel like it starts when they're so young. And the only time they see themselves is if they're reading a Martin Luther King book, a Rosa Parks book, a Harriet Tubman book, or they're reading about slavery. Like that's when they get to see themselves. Oh, if they're a football player or basketball player, maybe you can see a little bit of Michael Jordan,
Yep.
LeBron James, but that's about it. Like I don't know. I just feel like it starts at such a young age and it continues to build and build and build and build, but yet we continue to push it down and down and down and down and down. We send out mass emails that say, no, we're not going to talk about it anymore. Move on. Like, okay.
Yeah, and I feel like just for me personally, I feel like that's so embarrassing. Like that is all that we know.
It's
Just now getting wind of all of this information, like, oh my God, why were we not learning this before? It's embarrassing.
It really is. Because we can only, I mean, as students growing up, we can only control what learning by what we're given by our teacher.
Exactly.
And we
Mhm.
have to trust that our teacher is teaching culturally relevant teachings. And
Mhm.
10 years ago, when we were all in school, 15 years ago, that wasn't a priority set.
No.
So I think that that's what ignites the fire in a lot, and specifically this generation of teachers, like all of us going through school, is how absent-minded in reference to culture our teachers have been in integrating that into teachings. I hope to God that that sparks an interest in these teachers, because
Yeah.
I'm
So
tired of sitting here watching this happen.
Because a lot of them are just stuck in their ways that they're going to continue to do that.
Yep, because you pass standardized tests and that's how I get a check.
Yep.
And if you pass above
You get
average,
your-
then I get a bonus.
Mhm.
And that's all they care about,
Yep.
is staying in.
And if
with
you
the
think like that, you should not be in the
school
profession
system.
to begin with.
well, it's that question that is posed. Are you here for the job or are you here for the mission? And if you're not here for the mission, you're here for the wrong reason. You got to go.
And you need to get out.
Our youth, and you're building up kids that in a way that they shouldn't be built up. Like we can have really strong children in our society, but we continue to push them under the rug and act like their oppressions and their feelings and things that they've gone through there is not important. So that's another thing. Like as a future educator, I really want to know how to incorporate their thoughts and their relevancy to my teachings. I want them to be a part of my curriculum, because
And to feel included.
Texas white men that are writing my damn history books, they don't care if they're included. So it's going to be like we said, that raw, unapologetic way of teaching, and just keep on going until I stop you, I guess.
Right?
I mean, catch me if you can, I guess.
Literally though. Oh my gosh.